Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Facebook Live today. We have a busy audience here, full of users, viewers from all over the world. Thank you, everyone, for chiming in and letting us know where you're tuning in from today. I see viewers from Australia. It must be quite late over there, but really from all over the world. So thank you to everyone for tuning in. We're so excited about this fantastic session that we have lined up for you today from one of our returning experts who we really enjoy having on our show. So before we get to that, I'll just let you know about something big that we have going on here at MyHeritage. We just announced today that MyHeritage is going to acquire Philae, and this is a very exciting news here from MyHeritage. So MyHeritage announced today that we've signed agreements to acquire 90.91% of the share capital and 89.11% of the voting rights of Philae, a leading genealogy service in France. So this is very exciting news and the dawn of a new era for French genealogy. This will be very exciting for all of our French users at MyHeritage, users that have any roots in France. So we're very excited about this news. We'll put a link to the blog post that we posted today about this in the comments section, and you're all welcome to check it out and to read it when you have the time. So we're very, very excited about that news. And before we get into today's session, I'll just let you know about a draw that we'll have at the end of today's session. After the questions, we'll be giving away one MyHeritage Complete Plan to a lucky winner. So an amazing gift to give away. If you already have a complete plan, you can gift it to a family member. So for those of you who don't know what a complete plan entails at MyHeritage, it's the best plan we have to offer. It gives you unlimited access to 14 billion historical records. Those are all the historical records that we have on MyHeritage. Soon to be many more, of course, with all these French records that we will be adding in the coming months, which is very exciting. It will also give you unlimited access to our photo tools at MyHeritage. That's MyHeritage in Color, the MyHeritage Photo Enhancer, MyHeritage Photo Repair, Deep Nostalgia. So our whole set of photo tools, as well as unlimited family tree size. So a lot of amazing things that you get with the MyHeritage Complete Plan. We'll be giving that away to one lucky winner. So all that you have to do to enter is to tell us in the comments section how you've progressed on your genealogy this summer. Let us know what you've tackled this summer, what you've taken under your wing during these summer months, or if you're in the southern hemisphere in these winter months when you're stuck in home, maybe the weather is cold there. Let us know in the comments section, and we'll be awarding a MyHeritage Complete Plan to one lucky winner. You can also just leave a question for our speaker today in the comments section, and that will also enter you into our draw. We love questions. We love the discussion. That's what makes these Facebook Lives so interactive and so special. So feel free to leave your comments and questions throughout today's session. So now I'm going to introduce our special guest. We have with us Melissa Barker. She's a certified archives manager and public historian. She currently works at the Houston County, Tennessee Archives. She's affectionately known throughout the genealogy world as the Archive Lady. She lectures, she teaches, writes about genealogy, the research process, researching in archives, record preservation, and she's actually joined us for a few Facebook Lives in the past, exactly about some of those topics. So feel free to check them out on the MyHeritage Facebook page under the video section. Some really great past sessions, but we're super excited to have her with us today to talk about disaster planning for the genealogist. So let me bring Melissa up on the screen to say hello to you all. Let's see if we can get her up here. There's always a bit of a delay. Hello, Melissa.
Hello, Esther. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Well, I'm very excited about the new acquisition for my heritage because I have French ancestry. My maiden name is Lee Master, and I have traced them back to the 1600s from the Jersey Isles off the coast of France.
Oh, fantastic! So hopefully this will bring lots of new records and matches for all of our users with French roots, and I know that it's just such exciting news for everyone.
I am very excited.
Fantastic. So I see you're in the archives today.
I am. I'm coming to you live from the Houston County, Tennessee archives. We are in Middle Tennessee. So if you have Tennessee ancestry, that's something that I do as a professional genealogist, but I'm also an archivist and I work with these records here in this area. But today we're going to talk about disaster planning, something that we should all be thinking about.
I realized that we discussed, it's very interesting, we discussed a different angle of it earlier last week. We actually talked about, with Thomas McKenty, future-proofing your genealogy, what happens when you're gone. So this is, I guess, kind of a natural continuation, not just when you're gone, but also when things happen.
Absolutely, and this is going to really be a good piggyback for his presentation. I watched that and it was excellent. But this is something that doesn't matter where you live, that this can affect you.
Amazing. So shall I bring up your slides?
Yeah.
Okay, let me get them up here. Okay, great. So if you could just click on the right view and then we'll be all good to go.
How is that?
Perfect. Take it away.
Okay. Thank you, Esther. I'm glad to see everyone here. I was looking at the comments and seeing so many people from the United States and from other countries. I did see someone from Chattanooga, Tennessee, and so they're on the other side of the state from me. But I'm glad to have all of you here because disaster planning is one of those things that genealogists sometimes just don't think about. I know I really didn't think about it until I became an archivist 10 years ago. And so, but it's something that we should really be thinking about because, it's important for us to do our genealogy research. It's important for us to collect all those records and photographs and artifacts. But it's also important that we preserve these things and we make it possible for them to be handed down to our descendants and also be preserved, and so that they can be seen, read, or even just experienced by future generations. So that's why I'm going to talk to you about disaster planning today. We're talking about safeguarding our genealogical records. And so I put this presentation together because it's something that I have to deal with every day in an archive setting. We have to think about the records that we have in our care and how we are going to protect them and preserve them for future generations. So whenever I'm not here anymore, whenever the next archivist comes along, 100 years from now, we have to think about these things. And so one of the things that I teach genealogists is that you are home archivists. We do a lot of the same things as genealogists and archivists. Now, I've been a genealogist for 31 years. I've only been an archivist for 10 years. But there are a lot of similarities between the two. And one of those similarities is that we both collect historical and genealogical records. In an archive setting, people bring those records to us and they donate them. In a home archivist setting, you may get a call from that cousin that says, hey, we just cleaned out the attic. Would you like these boxes of stuff that they don't even want anymore? And it's full of things like this on your screen. This is a photograph of a family collection of records, the Lyle family collection, here locally in Houston County, that was donated to our archives. And as you can see, it is a little bit of everything. There are scrapbooks here. There is a ledger book. There's newspaper clippings, photographs, all kinds of things about this particular family that was donated to our archives. And so you have some of the similar things in your records at home. So that's why it is important as genealogists that we recognize our importance as being a home archivist and we take care of these records. If you're like me, I am always collecting photographs. My family just did not leave very many photographs to be handed down. We had an incident where my father was in the Air Force and was stationed in Germany. And when the military moved him back to the United States, everything made it back but one box. And as you can guess, that one box was full of all of the family photographs. So those were lost. In my husband's family, throughout the family history, they've had 3 house fires. And so many of those photographs have been lost. So it's important for us to preserve the photographs. Next, we receive donated records from others. Like I said, in archive setting, we receive those things on a daily basis from those who walk into our archives and bring us things. Like you, as genealogists, you talk to family members and they've cleaned out their attics, their basements, hall closet, and they have found stuff that they know you are the family genealogist. And so they call you up, and I've had it happen to me, and they say, hey, we found this in the closet. We know that you do this genealogy stuff. Would you like to have it? So all of these things are similar from an archivist standpoint, but also from a genealogist home archivist standpoint. This is a very large collection that we received back in 2014 here in the Houston County, Tennessee Archives. This is exactly how we received it. It belonged to a county historian named Nina Finley. She passed away in 2014, and a few weeks after her death, we received a phone call from her son wanting to know if we would like to have her research materials that was stored in her attic. And so we said, yes, we would love to have those materials. So 2 truckloads later, this is what we received. Now, not in the best condition, not in archival boxes, but at least he thought of us and brought us these materials. So we have been reboxing, cataloging, and processing these records, and we've been taking the steps to preserve them. Another thing that genealogists as home archivists should be doing is organizing and preserving their records, photographs, and ephemera. What is ephemera? Ephemera are those documents that were produced at a particular time for a particular reason and would have been normally been thrown away, and they should not have survived, but yet they have. Things like an auction handbill or a flyer for an estate auction. Maybe it was saved. Those usually are thrown away. So things like that. We should learn how to clean our records, take care of our records, put them in materials, archival materials, so that they don't get bugs on them and the elements don't get to them. This is a photograph of me where that red arrow is. I'm working on the Tennessee Supreme Court records. This was back in 2013. And so as archivists, archivists and home archivists, we should be taking care of any of the records that have been entrusted to us. And I'm a genealogist. I have records at home, and I try to take care of them just like I do here in the archives. So most archives, if you ever talk to them, they actually have a prepared disaster plan in place, and this plan is reviewed annually. Now, this disaster plan includes things like how to get out of the building when there's a fire and things like that. Here's an example of the New York State Archives. This is a photograph. So all of our archives all over the world think about disasters and how those will affect their records. And so they do their utmost best to preserve them so that they will survive. If archives are concerned about preparing for disasters, I think us as genealogists should also be concerned. And we should prepare for any disaster that might come our way. Now, we can't be perfect at it, but we can strive to do the things we know to do. And so that's what we're going to learn here in this presentation today. So let's talk about some kinds of disasters. Many of us experience them across the globe. Some of the ones that we absolutely can't do anything about are those natural disasters. And we define those as major adverse events resulting from natural processes of the earth. These are things that happen on this earth that we all live on that we can't do anything about. They're part of the earth revolving around the sun, and it's things that just happen. Unfortunately, we live on this planet, and there's going to be disasters that are going to happen. Hopefully, none of us lose our lives, but also hopefully we don't lose our records. One of those natural disasters is flooding. This is something that's very prevalent in certain places in the world, certain places in the United States, in Europe, Canada, Australia. I know that in 2010 here in Tennessee, we had what they call a 1 million year flood, where meaning they would never happen again. It was very bad. I remember it. This is a picture of part of it. We have not had flooding like that since then, and hopefully we never will. But one of those natural disasters is flooding, and water can do tremendous amount of damage to our records. Tornadoes. Now, we don't have tornadoes across the globe, but in the South, we experience tornadoes. This is a photograph from Clarksville, Montgomery County, Tennessee, where in 1999, a horrible tornado came through downtown. Now, normally these don't go right through downtowns, especially metropolitan areas, but this one did. And that building that you see there was the courthouse. It literally moved the courthouse off of its foundation. They were actually able to repair it, and it's still standing. But this is a natural disaster that we need to think about. Hurricanes. Hurricanes happen in certain places in our world. And so it's important that we keep in mind, we see these things coming. So maybe we have time to work on getting our records in a place where they can be preserved or saved. A lot of times you don't have that when it comes to tornadoes or other disasters. And so it's important that we think about these disasters, floods, tornadoes, and hurricanes, and prepare for them. Earthquakes. Now, here in Tennessee, we have earthquakes, but we don't have a lot of damaging type earthquakes. And so in California, they have those, and other places in the world, they have those. I'm thinking about Puerto Rico. I'm thinking of other places that have these earthquakes. It's important that we try to protect our records, and we're going to talk more detail about that. We cannot control these natural disasters. We're humans. We're not meant to be able to control them. But what we can do is know that they're there, know that they may happen, and take steps to preserve our records. Man-made disasters. Now, this is a different type of disaster. These are made by man. Man makes these disasters. Sometimes they're called human-made disasters. These are disastrous events caused directly or indirectly by one or more human actions. More flooding. I know this is a very dramatic photograph. Usually when you have a leak in your washing machine, it's not this bad, but you could have water leaks in your home that could cause damage. We're going to talk about some things that you can probably do to keep these from happening. But you may have flooding or water leaks in your home, and we don't want this to get to our records. Mold. This is something that I find genealogists really don't even think about. But if you have moisture in your home, and we're going to talk about humidity levels, you could be growing mold in your home, in your closets, certain areas where you can't see it. And so if you're doing that, this mold is actually alive, and it can grow, and it can get on your records and damage them. Fire. Fire can be a natural disaster when it is a lightning bolt that hits a home. But for the most part, fire is a man-made disaster. Like I said, my husband's family has experienced 3 total house fires. One was in 1963, one was in the 1980s, and then one was in 2001. And so I have experienced this with this family. You're going to find out later when I give you some tips that my husband was an insurance adjuster for 20 years. And so he was on the lawns with these people when their homes went up in flames. And one of the first things that they say out of their mouths when they see this is they say, "Oh, I just lost all of my pictures." So we're going to talk about what we can do about that. Another man-made disaster that genealogists really should put at the top of their list to watch out for is a computer meltdown, or a computer just broke. I've had this happen to me. I have lost everything that was on my computer because of a computer meltdown. So it's important we take care of our computer. In some cases, we can prevent man-made disasters in our homes with safeguards and with planning. And so that's why we're going to talk about that. So for me, in my opinion, not everyone agrees with me and not all archivists agree with me, but my opinion is the number one way to protect our records is digitization. Now, this protects the essence of the records. This protects the information on the records. This may not actually protect the records themselves, but if for some reason something happens to those, at least you have the digitized version. So I think the number one step that any genealogist or home archivist can take is to keep your information in a digitized format. So people are always asking me, well, what should I digitize first? Well, you should digitize all of your original records. So if you have an original birth certificate, get that digitized. If you have an original record that is a one-of-a-kind record, get it digitized. If you have a record that is very much has historical context to it, and it is important to your local history, to your national history in whatever country you live in, to state history if you live in the United States, get those digitized first. And then I would move on to things that you have copied out of books, maybe things you've copied from family members. And then I would go to those things that you have found on the internet. Of course, they should already be digitized. Usually when I get something off the internet, I just save it to a file on my computer. So what type of material should I use to digitize these original records? I would encourage you to use a flatbed scanner. One of the things I encourage genealogists to not do is to not feed any of your original documents through a copier feeder or a scanner feeder. The reason being is because it may work the first 100 times you do it, but that 101st time that you try to feed that original birth certificate through that feeder, it may take it and eat it up, and it comes out in pieces, or maybe it rips it or tears it. So in the archives world, we don't use feeders like that. We use flatbed scanners, or we use very good digital cameras that can use, takes great photographs. I mean, our cell phones these days take really good photographs of just about anything. So don't use the self-feeding copy devices or scanning devices. Use a flatbed scanner and digitize those original records first. Put the digitized records on an external device. Now, when I say an external device, I'm talking about an external hard drive, a thumb drive, anything that is external and separate from your computer. And then maybe take that external device and put it in a home safe, put it in a safe deposit box. I encourage people to get a copy of it outside of the home in case something happens to your home. I also encourage genealogists to upload these digitized records to an online cloud database, cloud service, something where you can access those records if God forbid, your home burns down. You can't even get to a computer in your home, but you can go to the local library, to the local archive, to a local place where they have computers, and you can access those records. Now, some of the ones that are for pay are things like Dropbox, Backblaze, Carbonite, but there are also some free ones up there. They're limited in space, but if you're only putting those very, very important documents in there, you might have enough room to just find a free cloud-based site and use that. I use a free one. And so I just put the ones that I think are the most rare records, the ones that I want to make sure survive, and I use a free cloud site. So cloud-based storage, use it. It's there for us to use. Like I said, there are several free kinds, and so you don't actually have to pay. Digitization will save the information that are contained in those documents. While this may not save the original paper documents themselves, it is the best way to preserve the actual information. Get the records out of the house. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean to box everything up and take it out. What it means is that when you make the digitizational copy on a hard drive, maybe put it on 2 to 3 thumb drives, and then share that with 3 friends or relatives. That gets it out of the house. Excuse me. And so it's important that we share this not only with friends and family, especially relatives who maybe are interested in genealogy, but it gets these digitized records out of the house. That way, if a disaster strikes your home, you can go and retrieve those records. The fire that happened to my father-in-law in 2001 was devastating. His entire house burned down. And just weeks before that happened, his wife, my stepmother-in-law, gave me a scrapbook that she had from when she was a little girl for me to digitize. So I had that scrapbook in my home when their house burnt. So we were very fortunate that we were able to give that back to her, and it was something that did not burn up. Place a copy of the digitized record in a safe deposit box at the bank. Or if you have a fireproof safe in your home, also put it in there. But again, just get it out of the home, either to a relative or at a safe deposit box. Another idea might be donate a copy of the digitized records to a local library, a local archive, maybe to a state archives, maybe to a museum or a university archive. If there are records that pertain to local history, especially in the area that you're doing research, if your ancestors lived in a particular area, talk to the archive about donating digital records. Many of our archives are actually full. They don't have room for the actual records, but many of these archives are now accepting digital collection donations because they actually have more room on hard drives and things like that than they do actual building room. And so think about donating to a local archive. In Houston County, Tennessee, we accept paper records and we also accept digital records. We do both. And we still have room, thankfully. But like I said, a lot of archives are running out of room. So it's important that you talk to them about what you're going to donate. They may only be interested in certain portions of it, especially if it's has historical nature to it. But offer to donate the digital records because they are most likely going to be able to take those than the actual paper records. So that's how to digitize. Get them digital. That is, to me, the number one way of preserving records. But then I get questions about how do I protect the original records? Because some of these original records are not in any other place, meaning you may have the only one. Let's say you have a birth record and there was a fire at the courthouse and the original birth records burned. And so you have the only original birth record of that grandmother or great-grandmother. So it's important that we protect these original records as well. First and foremost are climate controls. In your home, we all can't live in an archive. As much as I love my job, I love coming to work every day, my home is not an archive. In most archives, they have climate controls. If you ever go to do research in a library or an archive and you know it's going to be cold in there, so you take your sweater with you, that's what I'm talking about, because we keep it cold in archives and libraries because our records are already deteriorating just as a natural way of things. They are already deteriorating. If we keep the temperatures low, that slows down the deterioration of the actual paper. So that's why you have to wear your sweater when you go to these places. So I would encourage you, if you can help it, do not store any of your records in a basement, attic, or garage. These are not climate controlled. They are humid, they are hot, they have bugs and rodents. But if you can help it, do not store your records in a basement, attic, or garage. Now, I understand not all of us have perfect conditions for storing records, and so we do the best we can. But if you can find other places besides these, I would encourage you to do that. Store your records in the coolest part of the house. The temperature should be between 35 and 65 degrees. We keep our storage rooms at about between 45 and 55 degrees. And so maybe it's in a closet where it's an interior closet where it's cool and it's dark. That's a great place to put records. Under the bed is good. However, I would encourage you to make sure that they are enclosed in something that if water were to get to it, because it's on the floor under the bed, that it would not get to the records, like plastic containers and things like that. So, but think about cool. You want to find the coolest part of your house, and that's where you want to store your records. The temperature should be steady. If you can't find a place that is necessarily cool in your home, one thing to keep in mind is the thing that keeps records, keeps them to deteriorate, is temperatures that fluctuate, temperatures that go up and temperatures that go down, and they do this up and down, up and down. So if you can keep the temperatures at a steady level where they don't fluctuate, that will also be a great place to store your records. And you want to store your records where the humidity levels are about 30 to 50%. This will slow the deterioration rate of the paper. Humidity is one of those things that we fight all the time. Now, I live in the South, and if anyone knows anything about the South, you know that the humidity levels here can be crazy. Last week, our temperatures were in the 90s, but our humidity levels were probably in the 70s or 80s. I like to call it air you can wear, because when you walk outside, you immediately can feel the air on you. The humidity levels were so high. And so what we do in the archives is we have dehumidifiers. We run our dehumidifiers all the time, and we check our humidity levels every single day. Now, I keep our humidity levels at about 45%, and we set them there and they stay there. Just like temperatures, you do not want your humidity levels to fluctuate. And so your temperatures need to be at a consistent and steady temperature, and your humidity levels need to stay at a consistent, steady percentage. You can purchase temperature and humidity measuring devices. There is North American kinds, and there are kinds specifically for Europe. And so you need to get these devices. They're not expensive, and put them in the areas where you're storing your records. This way you know what are the temperature levels, what are the humidity levels, and if they're not where they need to be, or if they're fluctuating a lot, then you know maybe you might want to store your records someplace else. So get you one of these devices. Like I said, they're very inexpensive. We want to keep our records and photographs out of direct sunlight. This is something else that I find genealogists don't think about because they just don't know. Sunlight is one of the most damaging elements to our records and photographs. I have literally seen documents that have been framed and put on walls in someone's home, and the writing on that document has literally washed away because it's been in contact with direct sunlight for so many years. This is a photograph of my great-great-grandfather, Benjamin DeBolt. This photograph hung on my grandmother's wall for over 50 years. And I don't know if you can tell it, but the color, it used to be more vibrant. Even though it was a black and white, it was still very more vibrant. And the sun has literally washed a lot of the color off. I have seen photographs where the image has pretty much been washed off completely. And so if you have photographs and documents framed and on your walls or sitting on tables, just make sure that when the sunlight is coming through the windows, it's not hitting them directly. It can be in the room where the sun isn't hitting it, and it's not going to hurt them, but make sure that sunlight is not directly touching those records. Here are some tips from an insurance adjuster. I told you earlier, my husband was an insurance adjuster for 20 years. And so I heard so many horror stories that he would come home and tell me about. And I have remembered these things and these tips that he has given me as a genealogist and as an archivist. And so I'm going to share them with you. Never frame original photographs. Obtain good copies and frame the copies. Now, if you're like my grandmother and every inch of every wall in her home had a framed photograph, this might be a job. But if you can take it some time, bring down the photographs, the original photographs, take them out, get really good copies. In this day and age, with our copiers that we have, there's no reason why you can't get copies that look just like the originals. And put those copies up on the walls and store away the originals. If you look at these two examples, these are actually from my family. The one on the right, my husband actually put together for me, took all of these color photographs and actually did them in black and white. And this is in our front entranceway of our home. And these are all copies. And then on the left is pictures of my daughter and a dog that was very precious to me that we lost several years ago. And a couple of family items that I have on a display table that's in my home office. These photographs are all copies as well. And so as you can see, you can still display your photographs. You can still display the beautifulness of these photographs, but they can still be copies and they can be protected. Do not burn candles unattended. Believe it or not, many of the house fires that my husband had to handle was due to the fact that there were candles in the home being burned and they left the house and they were still burning, or they just didn't attend to them and they actually caught on fire and burned their house down. So if you're going to burn candles in your home, please do not leave them unattended. I'll tell you something else about candles. Some candles, not all candles, but some candles. When you burn candles, the wick in the candles actually they off gas. Those off gases can actually produce a residue that will land on documents and photographs, and that could be damaging over time. So I encourage genealogists to not actually burn candles in the home, especially if you have documents and photographs on display. Get you some of those candle warmers and use those. Because that way you don't have that fire, that flame, and also the residue that might come from burning those candles. This is something that my husband is very adamant about. Do not leave clothes dryers running while away from the home or while you're sleeping. He has had house fires happen because of the clothes dryer catching fire in the middle of the night while you're sleeping, or if you've left to go on a trip or go shopping and come back and your house is burned to the ground because you left the clothes dryer on and something went wrong. So do your clothes drying while you're awake, do it while you're at home, and don't leave it running while you're away, just for precaution's sake. Also, don't leave the dishwasher or clothes washer running while you're away or sleeping. Many times these water lines will rupture or burst, and then there's water all over the floor. Well, if you're at home when you're doing this, you can catch it. You can stop the dishwasher, stop the clothes washer, and you can get it cleaned up. If you're away or if you're sleeping, you may wake up to a floor full of water. And this water could damage any boxes of records you might have stored on the floor. So these are just some tips that I've learned from my husband as an insurance adjuster, and one that I do all the time. When I leave or when I'm going to bed, I don't have any of these things running. I have just made it a practice for myself. Also, if you have space or wall heaters, now we are in the middle of summer here in Tennessee, but winter is coming. And so if you have space or wall heaters, do not leave anything lying on top of them or boxes shoved up against them. Again, my husband has had house fires where there are certain kinds of wall heaters that people forget to turn off at the end of winter. And so when it starts turning cold, they automatically come on by themselves. And the heat that comes out, or if there's a flame, can catch whatever's laying on them on fire, or the boxes could catch fire. So pay attention to your space or wall heaters and that they're turned off when they need to be turned off. You don't have anything up against them. It's just something to think about, and something else to think about if you have them in your home to protect your home. Now, I know it's August, a second day of August, but Christmas is coming. And so many of us like to have those live Christmas trees. And so when you have one of those, they can be a fire hazard. And so we want to make sure that our Christmas trees are well hydrated. You water them, you keep them hydrated so they don't catch fire because they've gotten brittle and dry. So just keep that one in mind. Don't keep boxes of records or photographs on the floor. Now, this is something that we practice in the archive setting. Here in the archives, at the end of the day, when we are done with whatever we're working on, we may have several boxes that we're working with. we make sure that those boxes are not sitting on the floor. We put them up on tables, on chairs. We may be coming right back to them the next day, but we do this because we don't know what's going to happen overnight. Remember, I told you we had a terrible flood here in Tennessee in 2010. Some of that water got in the courthouse where this archives is located. And so when I finally could get here to the archives, which is in the basement of our courthouse, I found that some water had gotten into our archives, but it wasn't that bad, thankfully. But we didn't have any boxes on the floor because that water could have gotten to those boxes, gotten to the records in those boxes, and really damaged them. So if you are working at your kitchen table or working wherever it is you work in your home on your genealogy, if you have boxes of records, or even if you have documents and photographs laying out on the floor because you're working with them, pick them up before you go to bed or before you get done with that session, so that when you come back, if thankfully nothing has happened, you can go right back to working on them. Let's say a washing machine hose bust, or your ice maker in the refrigerator line bust, and you flood your home for some reason, it won't get to those records. Just something it takes 2 minutes to do, but it may save you a lot of grief in the long run. Also, don't overload extension cords or wall sockets with electronics. Now, I am guilty of this one. My husband has really had to teach me not to do this one. But you may do this. You may overload your extension cords, wall sockets with your electronics. We have a lot of electronics these days. So make sure they're not overloaded, because they could cause a fire. I know that this all sounds so dire and desperate, but it's what we need to do to protect our records, which we really want to do. So none of us want to experience a natural disaster or even a man-made disaster, but they happen. And so in order for us to make sure that our records are going to be preserved and protected, we need to take the steps necessary to make sure that they will be there for our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren. Right now, they're not interested in it. I get that. But in years to come, they may become interested in it. And if many of us don't know it, but many of us have records in our possession that have a lot of local historic value. And so what if you have information or documentation about something about your local history, or the local history where your ancestors lived, and you're the only one that has that information? So it's important that we plan and protect for the future generations. So thank you very much. I hope that you have gotten some tips out of trying to plan for a disaster. Like I said, we don't want these disasters to happen, but when they happen, we want to be prepared. And so I hope that you've gotten some great tips out of this. Visit my blog, A Genealogist in the Archives, where I talk more about disaster planning and other topics. Visit me on Facebook, The Archive Lady, and email me with any questions. If we don't get to them today, please email me. I'm always glad to answer questions. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Esther with other questions that you might have.
Thank you, Melissa. And I just see so many comments here of people who said, "Oh, I never thought of that," or "That never entered my mind." So many great tips to take away here that I think we all learned. So thank you so much for that. And for anyone who came in the middle or who missed some of Melissa's talk, as I said earlier, you could rewatch today's session on the My Heritage Facebook page under the videos section. So in case you want to rewatch any of that, don't worry, it's all going to be accessible after the session. So Melissa, we'll take a few questions now, if that's okay.
Yes, wonderful.
Fantastic. So first of all, I see Linda wrote here a comment. She said, "Years ago, I left my washer running, and when it went off balance, a loud buzzer went off. I was gone for 5 hours. My neighbors weren't happy with me. Now I never leave anything running when I'm not there, and that was over 50 years ago."
That's fantastic. Yes, we can learn from her mistake.
Exactly. Such great advice from your husband. That was incredible. I never even thought about not leaving the clothes dryer running, when you're not there. But such great advice. Let's see. We have a question here from Gary, who asks, what can you do if flash drives are damaged?
Well, I would suggest that you reach out to a computer company locally or some of the nationally known places where you can get things transferred over. I can't remember some of the names of them right now. Maybe they can retrieve the information off of the flash drive. Sometimes they're so damaged that it's done. I know that I've had a flash drive before in the past that was damaged that I tried to get the information off of, but it was so damaged that I just lost whatever was on there. And so that's why it's important to put it on more than one flash drive. And then also, I would suggest every 6 months to check your external devices, your external hard drives, your flash drives, wherever you have saved this information, and make sure that it's all still there and still working. Now, this seems like a lot to do and to try to remember to do, but if genealogy records are important to you as they are important to me, you'll go to that extra mile and do all that.
Okay, we have a question here from Petra, who's asked, I have an old wedding album of my grandma. Do I save only the photos, or do I try and save the whole book?
Well, I can't see the album, but what I usually tell people to do with albums like that are, yes, I would save the album as well. I would probably remove the photographs, keep them in the order that they are in the book. That's called original order. That's the number one rule that we have in archiving. And so put them in archival sleeves. But then also, when you're putting those archival sleeves in boxes for preservation, put that album in there as well. Because you know what? That was part of their wedding album. That was part of their wedding. And so keep the album too. I would encourage you to do that.
Chris wrote, just to continue on our earlier conversation, he wrote, my dad was an appliance repairman and he drilled it into our heads never to leave anything running while we were sleeping or away.
That's great advice.
Let's see. Ted asks, would you suggest vacuum sealed bags to store some documents and items?
Actually, probably not. The reason being is because the actual act of vacuum sealing could damage your documents. They make archival sleeves, and you can check any of the online archival stores, and they come in sizes down to like an inch by a couple inches by a couple inches up to a great big huge. And so get archival sleeves. These archival sleeves work really interestingly. When you put the documents or photographs in them, the static electricity that is in those sleeves, the way they've been produced, will automatically close around that document or photograph, and it will keep it in there. So no, I would not encourage you using the vacuum seal bags.
Okay. Let's see. Sherry asks, when framing photos or documents, can one use a special glass to reducing the ultraviolet rays or light?
Yes, you can. When you are working, if you have them framed by a professional framer, you can ask for that special glass that does that. I would still encourage you to not let these documents or photographs come in direct sunlight, because while that glass is protective, it does not protect from all of the rays of the sun.
Okay. Let's see. Oh, just so many comments here about about floods or fires. So it really does happen, and it's just such a lesson for all of us. I just see so many comments here. This happened to me, that happened, that happened to me.
None of us can escape it, whether it's a natural disaster or a man-made disaster, because we live on this earth and it's going to happen. And so that's why I do these presentations like this, because I'm very, very much encouraging genealogists that you can save your records, you can preserve them so that they survive through these disasters.
Bonnie asks if there's a way to preserve fabrics for future generations, like a uniform.
Absolutely. If you go to my blog, I actually have a blog post about preserving textiles. But yes, depending on the type of textile that you're trying to preserve, that's very simple. It's, believe it or not, a lot of what we do for archiving is actually pretty simple. It's just having the right materials. And so usually what you need, and you said a uniform, is you need archival tissue paper and an archival box. And you line the box with the archival tissue paper, lay the uniform in there, and put more archival tissue on top, close the box up, and then store it in a cool, dark, and dry place.
Tracy asked a question. She's watching on YouTube, and she asked, when is it time to gather the photos and documents and dig a hole for them? All this emergency preparedness has me thinking the worst.
Well, if you're wanting to know when is it a good time to start doing this, well, the time is now. Because if you've not started doing it yet, now's the time to start. And people say, oh, but I have so much. How in the where do I start? You start with the first 10 photographs. You grab up 10 photographs, you digitize them, put them in archival sleeves, and then you do the next 10. You don't get overwhelmed. Don't put too much on yourself. Take it one piece at a time and just do your best.
And, especially during the summer, sometimes, people have a lighter load in the summer and a little bit more time. So no time like the present.
Absolutely.
We have a question here from Tiffany, who asks, she says, some of the pictures in my albums are stuck on the pages. Is there a way to safely get them off the albums?
Well, it depends. If they're stuck and you try to get them off and it looks like it's going to peel off the image off the front, then I would leave them alone and leave them just like they are, preserve them and archive them just like they are. Now, one thing you might try putting your album in, believe it or not, putting it in the freezer. Many times the act of freezing something will make it pop off, but not always. You might try that. Now, don't leave it in the freezer for hours and hours. Leave it in there long enough for it to get cold enough that you might try to release it. If it doesn't release, then I would just leave it alone and archive it just like it is.
Okay. Such a great tip. I would never have thought of that, the freezer. We have a question here from Stephen. Stephen asks, we have wildfires and lots of smoke. Do the photo sleeves protect photos from smoke damage?
Actually, no, because a lot of the sleeves are what are called L sleeves. And that means that they're open on the top and the side, which means smoke can still get in there. So I know that there are wildfires raging, and so it's important that we digitize our records. Smoke cannot hurt digitization, especially if you have it uploaded into a cloud site, or if you've sent a thumb drive to grandma or your aunt who lives across the country or not where there are wildfires. So it's important that you take your original records, if you have them in sleeves, maybe put them in a fireproof box. I don't think the smoke should not be able to get to that. Depends on how heavy the smoke is. But digitization is really the way to go to protect the essence and the information on those records.
Wow, such great advice. So that's all the time we have for questions for today, Melissa. But we now have the honor of giving away a MyHeritage Complete segment to one lucky winner here in the audience. And hopefully it'll help you, our winner, to delve even further into your research this summer and hopefully work on digitizing all those records and photos that you may have in your home. So our winner today is Sandy Steele, and Sandy wrote to us and said, this summer via MyHeritage, which allowed us to connect to distant family who we didn't know, we extended our family tree back one more generation, 7 generations instead of 6. We discovered very old photos that family had uploaded and historical records. Our search led us to finding a Sephardic style marriage certificate we needed for citizenship application to Spain. What a discovery, Sandy. That's incredible. So we'll be in touch with you through private message to claim your prize. And to all of you out there that are working on summer projects, research projects, digitization projects, we wish you a lot of luck, and let us know how it's going. Reach out and tell us what you discover and how what type of progress you're making. We'd love to hear. So, Melissa, thank you so much for joining us today. What a fantastic session that'll really help all of us keep those lessons, front and center. So hopefully, natural and man-made disasters, we can make sure to preserve our records, our documents, our photos, despite all types of disasters.
Thank you, Esther.
And thank you to all of you for tuning in today. We loved having you join us, and we'll see you next time. Thank you all.